Hey, thanks so much for having me on here today.
Thank
I'm
you.
very
Thank
excited
you.
to be with you and excited to add value to people today.
Good. Thank you. Right. So let's get into it. One of the quotes that I really like from the book: "We sit in the calm waters, often thinking we have arrived somewhere, instead of realizing we are adrift in a sea of complacency."
Uh,
So, my question is, what are the first signs you see in people that make you think, well, I think this person is now being complacent?
well, I think it's something that you have to recognize yourself, and really, when it boils down to it, there's several different signs, that you might be drifting, and one of those first signs is comfort. Okay, and if comfort is your baseline, you might be drifting because growth always starts with discomfort. Anytime that we're growing, anytime that we're stretching, anytime that we're moving in a new direction, there's a discomfort that's there. So if you look at any areas of your life where it's just extremely cozy, that might be a sign that you're drifting when you think of the areas that you're most comfortable. Another way would to identify area that you are drifting would be that you're busy but not challenged. You see, and when you're busy but you're not challenged, routine has really kind of replaced reflection. And when you get in that automatic thinking every single day of doing the same things, you might be in a drift. So let me tell you what complacency looks like. Okay. It looks like busyness, it feels like comfort, and it sounds like excuses. It looks like busyness, it feels like comfort, and it sounds like excuses. And so the first way to identify drift is that, hey, where are the areas that I'm comfortable? The second way is, where am I busy but not productive? The third place that you might, you know, identify that you might be drifting is if you consume more than you create. If you consume more than you create. Now, this is one of those people I'm talking about, my habitual learners. They love to consume all day long, but not do anything. And because they just love to gather and gather, and they might watch this episode, then they're going to go watch another episode, then they're going to go watch another episode. And if you're consuming more than you're creating, you might be at drift. Another way that you might be drifting is if you lost energy in places where you once had that once inspired you, where you've lost energy for what once inspired you. And so think about those things that you do on a continuous basis that years ago it might have excited you to do it, but today there's no inspiration behind it. It's just one of those things where you just do it because you do it, or it's one of those things where you just kind of going through the motion. And another way that you might be a signal that you're at drift is that you avoid friction and feedback. Comfort becomes a cage in that case when you avoid friction and feedback. And so, no matter what it is that you're good at, or no matter what it is that you're going through, if you're avoiding feedback, if you're avoiding friction, or someone telling you that, hey, or not even being open to any type of feedback of how you do in a specific area, you might just be in a drift. And so, those are a couple subtle signs that you might be drifting. We do have a full quiz to kind of help you assess that. And, that's at Drift to Drive, the number two, quiz.com, Drift to Drive, quiz.com. And it's a full assessment to kind of help you identify some areas that you might be drifting. But in addition to that, we give you feedback on that, some ways that you can begin to take action and begin to move forward again. We just don't want to assess you and diagnose you and then not give you a prescription. We give you some steps that you can move forward.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for sharing all that. We have some people joining already. Say
Yeah.
good morning, and saying, I'm looking forward to seeing this session. Can't wait to hear about the book at MC next week. Right, that's exciting. That's exciting. And we have Vern also saying good morning.
Ah,
Excited to see
yes,
this.
good morning.
Thank you all for joining. One of the things that we can quickly tie this to is another quote from the book: 60% of employees say they feel disengaged at work,
Yeah.
leading to an approximate loss of 7.8 trillion. That's a lot of money. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a lot of money. And again, this goes back to routine. If you think about your workplace and we think about that disengagement level, People are doing just enough to get by, doing just enough not to get fired, just enough not to get, noticed. And so they can keep doing the same things. To look for this kind of complacency inside of culture, we look for certain phrases, phrases like this. Maybe somebody in the chat has heard this phrase before. It is what it is. Come on, if you've heard that in the chat before, type yes in the chat, okay? If you've heard the phrase, it is what it is, type yes. If you hear a phrase like, well, that's the way that we always do it, there may be some complacency inside the workplace there. If you hear phrases like, well, this is just my job, right? When we come to this is just inside of our organization, we begin to have these subtle signs of complacency inside of the workplace. And when we get complacency inside the workplace, what happens is we stop reinventing. We, again, go back to that place where we're busy, but we're not challenged. And the company begins to slowly decline. And so if we don't address complacency in the workplace, if we don't address the disengagement in the workplace, we're going to see people that quit because they're just not being challenged. We're going to see people that, continue to remain the same, never get promoted on the job, never develop people. You're going to see profits decrease. You're going to see increase turnover inside the organization. So complacency in the workplace and disengagement in the workplace is really killing a lot of organizations.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. Again, if you have experienced this, have you seen these, the items that Chris listed, please type yes in the comment. If you have experienced any of this, or you know somebody experiencing this at work, please type that. So even away from work, if we stepped away from work, one of the quotes that I like from the book is, an average American today spends 33 hours a week watching television. Yeah. You said that could be another job. That could be a side hustle.
Think about that. That is a side hustle, watching TV. And, I talk about this in the book because I had this, what I call my TV turnaround years ago. I was attending a conference and I got a chance to listen to a speaker, Dr. Dennis Kimbrough. Now, Dr. Dennis Kimbrough rewrote Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, from an African-American perspective. So what he did, Napoleon Hill, in his original book, he interviewed millionaires to figure out what were the secrets to success. Well, Dr. Dennis Kimbrough was commissioned to rewrite the book to see if the principles still applied from an African-American perspective. And, I was sitting inside of him listening about going into the homes of interviewing millionaires all across the U.S. And he said that he noticed something. He said that he noticed that as he walked into people's homes, the bigger the homes, the smaller the TVs, and the larger the libraries. And then the smaller the homes, the larger the TV and the smaller the libraries. Now, in that moment, I had heartburn, I had heartache, I had everything, because at that moment in life, I lived in an 800 square foot apartment. I had a 55-inch tube TV that I had to take the back off of to get inside the place, right? You remember those big TVs, right?
Yes.
And then on top of it, there wasn't a book to be found inside my home. And so I knew in that moment that, hey, I've got to do something different. I can't if I want to go in a different direction, I've got to shift gears. I've got to let go of the TV that we call the electronic income reducer, and I've got to get into books. And so in that moment, when I talk about this in the book, it's really talking from a place of a TV turnaround, whereas you can spend the time on the television, or you can spend the time scrolling on your phone, or you can spend the time reading in a direction that you want to go. And I believe that reading is the foundation of truly your next breakthrough, your next career, the next business that you start, your next level. It all begins with gathering information that will move you in that direction.
Wow. Gathering information that will move us in a particular direction, right? Please type yes in the chat if you agree with this. If you disagree, let us know. Let us know your experience with TV. For me, I think I really have a very big TV. Now I have to think about maybe get to read on the TV and get more books, right?
Well, let me tell you, like I took that so serious. I took that so serious. Now I have TVs in my home now, but believe me, my library is larger than the inches of my TVs. Okay, and but during that time, I went through a 7-year period, 7 years where I did not have a TV in my home. Went through 7 years that I did not have a TV in my home, and then that's when my library began to expand. And now every single day, I mean, there's a book that hits my mailbox every single day. The library is growing, and reading has really become the foundation of everything I do. You cannot give what you do not have, and so reading has just really become foundational in everything that I do.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I think one of our guests is saying, well said, Chris.
Yeah.
Reading is a foundation.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. One of the things that I also really like from the book is when you said, we feel like an imposter when our need to impress outweighs our desires to progress.
Yeah.
That's a very difficult one in a world whereby first impression matters. And we always want to try to quickly get those first impression in. But then how can somebody balance, well, I want to look good, but then I also want to let this person know this is what I need. This is where I
Right.
need to
Yeah.
get to. Mhm.
But listen to your back end posture. Okay. The back end posture is where you served it. You see, when we have imposter syndrome, to catch those of you up that are just tuning in, he's talking about imposter syndrome. And the way that I define imposter syndrome inside the book is when your need to impress is greater than your need to progress. And so you can look good. I'm not saying, hey, don't look good. What I'm saying is, don't look stupid by not asking the questions that you need to ask. All right. Because here's what I found out about successful people. Successful people, and when you're asking questions and when you take a posture of a student, when you take a posture of a learner, what happens is I've never seen a successful person go, oh my goodness, Chris is just so stupid. He's so curious. Right. Successful people want to share information. They want to share their knowledge. They want to be around people that want to learn. I think about going to dinner with John Maxwell often. And you would think that at a table with John Maxwell is going to be talking the whole entire time, just sharing wisdom. But very rarely do I see John Maxwell at a table giving a sermon, giving a lesson, doing all the talking. John Maxwell is one of the most curious people on the planet. His need and desire to want to learn and grow and progress is greater than his need to impress. And so when we can take a posture of, hey, look, yeah, sure, I can look great, but I want to learn. I want to grow. And I'm going to ask quality questions. And I'm going to, hey, I don't have to have the desire to want to be the expert and know it all. I don't have to be the smartest person in the room. And when you can take that posture, that changes the outcome that you're going to get inside of a room. So you don't have to go into a room and say, hey, I have all the answers. Go into the room with all the questions and be a curious learner. And so, this word imposter syndrome is coming up more and more and more of people that are stepping out to do things that, they're asking themselves the question, well, what are people going to think if I step up and say that I'm doing this? Well, hey, you're doing it just like everyone else, but you can also grow with people versus trying to grow above people. And so, it's really taking time to just really focus on that desire to progress instead of trying to impress.
Wow, thank you. Still on the subject of reading, something that I really like in the book. There's a lot of things in the book, so I recommend you get a book, please. You said in your book that you used to be the president of the Book Haters Club.
Yeah.
how, was, how was your tenure as the president, and how did you transition from that to somebody who now writes books, and we are talking about the book?
Yeah. I really think it came from like I did not read my first book until I was 19 years old. I didn't read a full book until I was 19 years old. And it was as a result of taken a sales job that I had took just after getting kicked out of college. And what we would do is every single day before we would go out and sell, we would read a chapter from the book Think and Grow Rich, and then we would go out and we would sell. And that was the first full book that I read. But my reading turnaround came from Dr. Dennis Kimbrough, but it also came from another opportunity. I had opportunity to have lunch with a billionaire with a B from Australia. It was Mr. Peter Daniels. And I remember sitting down with Peter Daniels, and we were sitting at the table, and I had my notepad and my pen out, ready to ask questions. And I asked him, I said, hey, what's the one thing that I could do that would make the greatest difference in my life? And without any hesitation, he said, read. Now, in that moment, I kind of paused, like many people watching right now, said, okay, yeah, read, right? But here's what he said. He says, Chris, he goes, I attribute my billions of dollars to reading over 5,000 books in my lifetime. He says, and at the age of 27, I was an illiterate bricklayer. So he could not read at the age of 27, at the age of 75, a billionaire because of reading. And he said, Chris, what happens is when you begin to read, what happens is you build inside of your mind a vocabulary of overcoming insurmountable odds. He goes, your mind doesn't know the difference between reality of what you're putting in or what you're thinking. And so you can put in whatever you want and move it in the direction that you want. So that's when I began to turn up the reading. Now, I had thought that, man, at that point, I was reading like maybe a book every couple months and thought, oh, I was doing good. But when I got around him, I thought, oh my goodness, if I could read a book a month, oh my goodness, this would be incredible. So I began reading a book a month. But then I was getting around people that were reading, saying, hey, I read about a book a week. And I thought, oh my goodness, a book a week, 52 books in a year. And so I began to increase the muscle, and I began to pick up my speed of reading, and I began to read 52 books in a year. And then I began to get around people that said, I read about the equivalent of a book a day. And I thought, oh my goodness, how in the world does a person read a book a day? And so I began to increase that. But I had a hatred for reading because, quite honestly, I was a slow reader. Quite honestly, I didn't see the point of reading at an early age of like, how is that going to help me? Why would I spend, $15 on a book, $30 on a book? Why would I invest that money? But what you have to understand is that a $15, $30 investment could change your life forever, because one idea executed well could change your life forever. And so I started out not wanting to read, but as I progress and as I begin to see how books are the foundation and how fast they can move me and how I can shortcut my learning, oh, that desire to consume reading just really fueled and got me into way different levels of life than I would have ever been in had I not chose to read. And so what I tell a lot of people is like, they ask the question, well, Chris, how did you go from here to there? I said, hey, I'm just like you. The only difference between you and I is a couple thousand books. Yeah. The only difference between you and I is a couple thousand books, right? And so reading truly what I think are the keys to success.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing. Anne is sharing one of our takeaways already. Consuming without creating hits differently. That's when you said that we have to be able to produce more than we consume. All right. If you agree with that, please put yes in the chat. Yeah. If you're also doing that already, or you need help with doing that, put some comments in the section. We have our guest might able to help you with that, because he has a book that we're talking about. You can start from there. From there, you learn how to. Yeah. From drip
to drive.
From drip to drive.
But inside the book, not only do I talk about reading, but I also teach you how to read inside the book, and how I went from being a slow reader to being a hyper consumer of information, but also being a hyper action taker. So it's one thing to consume, it's another thing to take practical application. And it's really a two-step process that I teach called learn a little, do a little. Learn a little, do a little. So how do you go from consuming and just having shelf help, books just sitting on the shelf, Well, you learn a little bit from the book and then you go do a little bit from the book, and it's going to move you in the direction that you want to go.
Yes. For people that are giving themselves excuse not to buy the book already, let's talk around that. Because people need encouragement. For you, what is one of the most favorite reason people give you for not reading?
Well, the number one reason is people don't have time. Well, I don't have time to read, and that's not true at all. We have a choice, but what we choose to do is we choose to pick up this phone and scroll down the pages. We choose to watch TV. We choose to crush candy on the phone. We choose to waste time doing other things. And so, what I found is that we've got plenty of time throughout the day. We've got plenty of time to read every single day, but what most of us do is we try to, we try to do what all the gurus tell us to do, which is wake up early, start your day off with reading 1 hour per day. And we try to, that's like trying to go into the gym and doing a 2 hour workout and you don't work out. And so, I don't know about you, but I've got 6 kids. And so my morning looks a little different than the average person's morning. So I'm not waking up reading, for an hour before I get my day started. But what I can do is I can use the method that I teach in the book called AHAB, which is always have a book. Always have a book. Now, here's what happens is that if I'm using the AHAB strategy, is that all day long, I've got book in hand. And so instead of picking this up, I pick this up. Instead of picking this up, I pick this up. So instead of scrolling for 5 minutes, I can read 1, 2 pages for a minute. You'll find the time. And what happens is when you're reading, 3, 4 pages instead of scrolling for 4 or 5 minutes, these books go down fast. And so, it's really one of those cases where we just have to choose the priority in our life. Do we really want to move in a new direction, or do we want to continue to just sit back, scroll, sit back, watch TV? Or are we going to do different things, or do you want to actually make that choice to read?
Wow, thank you. And we're going to make the choice to read. We're going to buy this book. That's what we're deciding. Please put yes in the chat if you agree with me and increase our learning. And to even make this really clear, one of the challenges that you also itemize in your book is the fact that we try to go somewhere without knowing where we want to go.
Right.
The fact that people start moving to a particular destination without knowing what they want.
Yeah.
And my question is, why do people request clarity and guidance before they know where they want to go to?
Well, I think that people have a general idea, but they're not dead set on it. So in the book, we talk about 2 types of complacency. We talk about what we call complacency myopia, which myopia is a optometry term for nearsightedness. So this person that has complacency myopia, again, they stay very busy. They can, each day they're busy, they're learning, they're growing, but it's on something different every single day. It's like it's not streamlined at all. And so they don't have any big vision of where they're going. They just know, well, if I'm busy, I'm going to go somewhere. All right. Then they end up just going in circles because they're not there. But then you have those people that have complacency hyperopia. Now, hyperopia is an optometry term for farsightedness. Now, those people, they can see the big vision. I mean, they know that, hey, this is what I want to do. But then they look down and they refuse to move forward because they don't know or they can't see the next step. So they talk about the big vision. They have the vision board, but then they don't take the close steps. So our goal is to have, 20/20 vision. Our goal is to have a multifocal lens. Some of you out there have that multifocal lens. At the bottom, it's going to help you with the stuff that's near. At the top, it's going to help you with the stuff that's far. We have to have this multifocal lens in life. And so we want to make sure that we have a vision, a clear picture of where it is that we want to go. But then you have to ask yourself, what's the next easiest step to move me towards that big vision that I have? Not every single step, but what's the next easiest step that I could take? So you can set any example, any goal, right? It doesn't matter what it is, and you can get clear on it. So the first question you have to ask yourself is, what do I want? What do I want? Right now, most people woke up today not having any idea what they want for today. They just woke up. Thank the Lord I woke up today, right? But there's no vision of today besides it's Saturday. What am I going to do today? But if you ask yourself the question, what you want, you've got a big picture of where you're going. Every single day that you wake up, you can now play something every single day that ends in day that moves you one step closer to that big vision of where you want to go. All right. So what's my big vision right now? My big vision is New York Times bestseller. All right. This is the big vision. New York Times bestseller. So you know what happens every single day? I wake up as I'm going, I'm not trying to sell 1,000 books today. What I'm saying is, hey, what's one thing I can do today to sell one book today to get me one step closer to New York Times bestseller? Now, whether I make it to New York Times bestseller or I make it, that doesn't matter. Ultimately, what I want and what I'm really saying is, what's my big vision is I want to help as many people as possible. So today I wake up and say, hey, how is it possible that I'm going to help somebody today? Well, I know that I'm hopping on a podcast today. I know that I'm hopping on live today. And that's how I'm going to add value today. Tomorrow, how am I going to talk to one person tomorrow about this book tomorrow? How am I going to add value to someone tomorrow? Right. And so if we do something every day that ends in day that moves us towards our goal, and we've got that big, clear vision, man, we're going to move towards that faster than we can possibly imagine.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I have my high school association here from Nigeria, Afro Grounds. Thank you. The difference between the rich and the poor is just a couple of books away. Thank you for joining. That's very true.
He's not wrong.
Yeah, Baron, can't agree more. It's about prioritizing and getting out of the comfort zone. Yeah. Then and always have a book in hand. Yeah. That's true. So that you don't use the phone, use the book, just like Chris explained. So another part of the book that I really liked is when we're talking about learning from other people that are different from us.
Yeah.
How has that shaped your own journey when you learn from people that is different from you?
Yeah, well, it's learning from people that are different from me that value the same things. Okay, learning from people that are different than you that value the same things and that are moving in the direction that you want to go. So I believe one of the greatest factors to any success that I've had, however we define success, for me, it's, whatever degree of success I have, right? It's as a result of always finding someone that's further ahead of me in that specific area of life that I can learn from. And so I do this for everything. I am a certified teaching pro in pickleball. Now, those in Nigeria might not know what pickleball is. It's a game between kind of like tennis, kind of like table tennis or ping pong, on a smaller court. All right. But I fell in love with that game the very first time I played. And I said, oh my goodness, I want to play this game. So 2 days later, what I did was I went and I found a coach that I could begin to learn this game from. Then what happened was that got me around other people that were further ahead of me, which I could ask questions about the game. I can ask questions about the strategy. I can ask questions about the equipment. I can ask questions about everything involved in it. It allowed for me to progress faster than I would have just trying to figure it out on my own. Now, I tell you that about a game because I want you to see how it applies to every area of life. But I also did that with speaking. Right? When I wanted to become a professional speaker, what I do, I sought out professional speakers and I would reach out to speakers and ask them, hey, if there's any way that I could potentially serve you, just let me know, because I wanted to get in proximity of those people that were further ahead of me. So one, I could observe what was going on. Two, if the opportunity would arise, I could ask questions in order to learn more about the specific topic. So it doesn't matter what area that you want to grow in, whether it's your finances, whether it's your relationship, whether it's in your parenting, whether it's in your fitness. There is whatever area of life, there's somebody that's further ahead of you in that area, that if you get around those individuals, get a mentor, get a coach, someone that you can learn around, it's going to always move things faster for you than you can on your own. So the value of learning from other people is really invaluable. So we have to be clear on what it is that we want. We have to gather information through books and things of that nature. We have to get mentors to be able to guide us, and we have to get around other like-minded people that are moving in that direction as well too.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And to support what you just said in the book, you said 76% of people said that they think mentoring is important, but only 37% actually take steps towards getting mentoring. That's very powerful. That's very powerful there. So later on, you were able to do all these things that you did, and you mentioned the shining object problem.
Yeah.
What is that? Any personal story you want to share on that?
Yeah, when it comes to shiny object syndrome, how many people in the chat, real quick, I just want to see how many of you have shiny object syndrome? You kind of get distracted by the different things that are coming on there. In the chat, just type me. Just type me in the chat, okay? If that's you, you get distracted from all the different shiny objects. We all deal with that. And so what we have to do is we have to learn how to filter information. In the past, our success was really kind of dictated by the information that we had access to. If you go back to the 1950s, 60s, where, it was illegal for certain people to be able to read in certain countries, like, you just didn't have access to it, or, people couldn't get into colleges, people couldn't, get access to information. So in the past, your ability to succeed was based upon the information that you had access to. Today, with these phones, right, we've got access to all the information that we could possibly want. So now that gives us the problem of shiny object syndrome. We've got access to too much information. So what we have to do is we have to filter the information well. And so what I do in order to filter information is I do what's called layered learning. Layered learning. Now think about this. If you're listening to this, how many of you have done this before? You're reading a book on one topic. You're listening to podcasts and audio on a different topic. You are taking a course on another topic, right? You're taking a course on another topic, and you're attending a conference on another topic, right? And then you're wondering, why am I so overwhelmed? But here's what happened. When the book that you're reading lines up with the audio that you're listening to, which lines up with the course that you're taking, which lines up with the conference that you're attending, which lines up with the people that you're around, oh my goodness, now you're getting movement and you're learning things faster because of layered learning. You can eliminate the shiny object syndrome if you simply become a good filter person. If you can get the ability of filtering down, oh my goodness, your learning, your growth, your speed towards your goals will accelerate significantly.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. We have one me here. Anne said me. So if you're gonna relate with this, if you have the challenge with the shining object, please type me in the chat. We want to hear from you. What's your own experience? That's gonna be something that we can also learn from. Right. One of the places in the book that I also find very interesting is this quote. My friend's mom said, "Oh, Chris, honey," she explained, "you and your family won't be able to afford one of these cars."
Yeah.
What's the conversation about that?
Yeah. So this was we all have these kind of anchoring and shaping moments inside of our lives. And I remember I was riding in the car with a friend of mine and his parents, and we were driving on the highway, and then this car just zooms past us. And it was, it was a 1994 Chevy Camaro. Now, it was a sports car, and that's when they had just changed the body shape of this car. And I mean, it looked like a spaceship that came by. And I mean, my heart just sunk. I just saw this beautiful car, and I said, oh, man, I want one of those one day. And she politely said to me, she says, oh, Chris, your family, you'll never be able to afford one of those type of cars. Now, she wasn't saying that in any type of mean way. I think it was just a casual comment, maybe just trying to temper expectations because it was out of reach of where we were at financially at the time, and I remember that moment so clearly. And it was a moment that made me pause, but it was a moment that also made me dream. Because what happened in that moment was, I began to ask the question of myself, well, why not? I mean, there's many of you right now that have had things that you've shared that you desired, that you want, that you could have, that you've seen, and then someone comes in and says, well, that's not for you. And for me, I always ask the question, why not me? Why not me? When you see the large home, when you see the whatever it is that you want, and it's not about material things at all. It's about that desire that's put inside of you. And if that desire is put inside of you, I believe that that is real and it's obtainable if you have clarity on it, if you begin to take the action steps to become the person worthy of whatever that thing may be. But yeah, I remember that moment very clearly, and, what that thought, but it really caused a why not moment for me.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing it. Anne is saying, as an educator and avid reader, I appreciate the layered learning. That makes a lot of sense. I think every one of us should think about that. I completed my John Maxwell coaching certification through layered learning. Right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that, Anne. One of the stories that I also really was excited to learn from is the volunteering experience with Lethea Owens.
Yeah.
What did you learn from that experience that you would like to share?
Yeah, I mean, Lethea was, again, if we go back to mentors and going to someone that was ahead of where you are, when I wanted to become a professional speaker, one of the things I did was I said, hey, I need to get around other speakers. So what I did was I picked up the phone. First, I went to Google and I looked for every professional speaker inside of, the St. Louis area. And then I was brave and I picked up the phone and I called every single speaker in the St. Louis area. And I said, hey, my name is Chris Robinson. I'm wanting to find out more about getting paid to speak. If there's any opportunity for me to serve you, I'd be more than happy to help you out in any way. Now, again, I didn't call saying, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee so I can pick your brain, right? I didn't call and say, hey, do you have some time to tell me all your knowledge that you've spent years and years accumulating to give to me for free? No, I said, hey, how can I serve you? There's two ways to get a mentor in your life: seek to serve or pay to play. Seek to serve someone or pay to play means that you're going to have to invest in that relationship for them to spend time with you. So I was seeking to serve. I called every speaker in the St. Louis area. No one called me back. And then eventually Lethea called me back. And she says, hey, Chris, thank you so much. That was very kind of you. I don't have anything now, but if something comes up, I'll let you know. I was excited because I had talked to a professional speaker. But then a couple of days later, she calls back and she says, hey, Chris, my cameraman has canceled. Is there any way you could be my cameraman for the next day at this event in St. Louis? I said, well, yeah, I'd love to be the cameraman for you. Now, I had no idea what it meant to be a cameraman, but I knew it was an opportunity to serve. So I go down to that event and I grab her bags. I grab the camera. I set up the camera. I'm working it back and forth. And, at lunchtime comes and she says, hey, Chris, hey, I know that you had mentioned that you had some questions about getting paid to speak. Would you like to ask some questions? I said, of course. Well, I was prepared for that mentor and I had a list of questions and I began to ask my questions. She began to answer the questions and we had a great time. Well, Our time was up. I closed my notebook and I go back to serving her. Did so well that day before she saw the video footage. I did so well that day. She says, "Hey, Chris, would you want to come back tomorrow?" And so I did. I came back the next day. I set up the camera. At lunchtime, we asked questions. But at the end of lunch, she said, "Hey, Chris," she goes, I want to give you the opportunity to speak today. She goes, "I want to give you the opportunity to go on stage and speak for 5 minutes. And I want you to share from a slide that I talked about yesterday." Well, I went up on stage, I shared for 5 minutes, and you could see her smiling in the back, ear to ear. I did a great job. And after that, she says, "Chris, I'd be more than happy to meet with you even more to help you find out more about getting paid to speak." And Lethea became a mentor in my life and still a great friend to this day. And but it was really, again, out of a motive of seeking to serve, not just what can I get, but how can I add value to that. And over a decade now, Lethea and I have added value to each other's lives as we've both grown in our prospective careers. It's just been an amazing relationship that has truly been one that started with the pure motive of just adding value to people.
Wow, wow. Thank you. Thank you. That's a powerful story. And to support that, John C. Maxwell wrote to support the book, "I've watched Chris grow from a hungry student of leadership to a world-class coach, speaker, and mentor." That's why you're sharing all this. And thank you so much for allowing yourself to learn. Now we're all learning from you now. Thank you so much. All right, we're wrapping up. One question that I really have to ask, how's the book going? And there's something that I've not seen done that you're trying to do, which is the audiobook, recording audiobook. How's that going? And
yeah. Well, the book is going great. So the book is done. It comes out September 2nd, will be released, but it's up for pre-sale right now. So you can get that on Amazon. And, but the audio book was something different. I had never in my life had done an audio book before. And this is actually my first book as well, too. But the audio book was quite the challenge. I didn't think it was going to be that difficult. I mean, they had put on my calendar for 2 days for this audiobook, 2 full days that they had booked in the studio. And I go, no way, this takes 2 days to read this audiobook. And so I show up, I skipped the first half of the first day and I show up at 12 o'clock and I say to the audio producer, why in the world do they got this on my calendar for 2 days? Because he knows I come in studio, I deliver, I get it done. I'm always out well beyond the time that they have scheduled. And he says, well, Chris, it takes 2 days. I said, no, this doesn't take 2 days. And I began to read the audio book. And about 2 hours in, I said, oh, my goodness, this takes 2 days. And so, so it really did. It was really a challenge, just reading, every single word that you've written in the context to make sure that, it communicates the way that it's written. And, something very exciting I'm really excited to do is that, I've recorded the whole book and that's ready to go. But the first chapter of the book, I'm actually going to be doing live in front of a live audience for about 200 Maxwell certified team members here in just a couple of days. This book is truly dedicated to all the Maxwell Leadership Certified Team members. And I thought, man, how awesome would it be if I could do the opening of this book in front of 200 of my Maxwell leadership friends. And, so that way, every single time that they listen, they get to say, hey, I was in the room on this very first chapter right here. So excited about that audio book coming out. Of course, it'll be in the Kindle version as well, but doing a lot. It's going well, man. It's going outstanding.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Please get the book. So one more last question. I usually like to ask one question that has nothing to do with the main topic. And for you will be, if you have to introduce a new idea to the world, based on what you've lived, what you've experienced, what idea would that be?
Yeah, if I had to base, I don't think there's, again, I think I talk about it in the book, I don't think there's any new ideas in the world. I think that we take this kaleidoscope and then we may have a new perspective, but the ideas itself I don't know that I have any unique, hey, this is brand new idea that you've never heard before. But if I had to say, hey, one thing, if I had to look back at all the time that I've spent as a leader, and if I had to share one thing with people that are in a
Yeah.
leadership role that are trying to grow, is a real simple philosophy that I have about leadership, and it's this: treat people like people and adults like adults, and you will lead well. Treat people like people and adults like adults, and you will lead people well.
Wow. Treat people like people, treat adults like adults. So not every individual is like adults, right? That's a hidden joke. All right, that's it. What are the last comments you want to tell our guests before we
Yeah.
exit?
Yeah, just thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the opportunity to let me come in on a Saturday morning to add value to people, share information. Hopefully, you got encouraged today. And just thank you for helping me expand the vision, the mission of this book, From Drift to Drive, and helping people break the chains of complacency in their life.
Good, thank you. Please like, subscribe, comment, and don't forget to get our guest book, Chris Robinson, From Drifting to Driving. It's on the Amazon. It's gonna be available in September, but you
Yeah.
can actually pre-order it now.
Yeah.
Thank you for the session, Chris, and see everyone next time. Bye.
Bye bye.